Hey all, we are going to talk about barbarians. We're going to cut class, talk about the barbarian in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. Hopefully this will be a series. I'll go through each class, my thoughts, my feelings, my assessment, and how we can breathe new life into them and stop making them stereotypical. All right, so let's think about the barbarian. Most of us hear barbarian, we start thinking about like fur loincloth, battle axe, two-handed sword, lots of rage, and just charging in the combat. It doesn't have to be that way, and I'm here to tell you that the stereotypical barbarian, in some ways, when you play it that way, you're just playing them wrong. All right, and the reason why I say you're playing it wrong is because you are denying yourself the ability to engage in all elements of the story, right? You're setting yourself up for failure. So let's start with barbarian tactics. Now, we all know barbarians are strong. They have a lot of endurance. They tend not to wear armor. They tend to deal out a lot of damage by smashing things, cutting things down, waiting in the combat. And there's always a time and place for that, right? You got a bunch of orcs or ogres or something like that. You want to be the first in the combat and just start wailing away. But I'm here to tell you the one thing that it's not just annoying you, it's annoying everybody else at the table when you play your barbarian. And this act needs to stop immediately. It's the one thing. No one else is responsible for constantly healing your character. They have a choice to heal your character. They have a choice to boost your character. They have a choice to buff your character. No one else is responsible. It is not their job function to heal your character at all at any time. That is an element of role-playing when another person decides that they want to play a character that has those abilities, such as healing, and decides to use them for your character when appropriate. So let's go into tactics. Well, I basically just told you no one's responsible for saving your damn life, and you're jumping into combat. You know, a little thanks would help. Well, here's the deal. The excuse that, air quotes, that's what my character would do, is just idiocy, right? You're choosing to engage the enemy, engage in combat, engage in the world by running headlong into combat. Well, here's some tactics that as a barbarian you might want to use. First is you have the ability to sneak around. If you've picked Dex as your tertiary ability, so you have a high strength, you have high con, you have Dex, you can be sneaky. Use stealth. Sneak behind an enemy and then attack it. Use your athletics abilities and acrobatics. You can climb above enemies. You do not need to be the very first person yelling and screaming, running headlong into combat. Learn the grappling and pushing and knockdown rules, right? So you could push a very large creature off of a rope bridge. You can push an enemy into a wall of fire or a grease spell by one of your allies. You can grapple a creature trying to hold it down or restrain it when your other teammates maybe come behind it, or use a spell to ensnare it or something like that, or use a net to, grab a wild creature or something. Also, play a little smarter. Barbarians do not have to have intelligence and wisdom as their dump stat, or even charisma. So if you're going to play an intelligent barbarian, maybe you make a lot of noise, but you lead the enemies into a narrow passage where they cannot spread out and surround you. Or you lead this nasty creature away from your hidden allies so that they can attack it from behind. Or you strike once or twice and then run for it, not splitting your party, but splitting the enemy so that they cannot use their tactics together. Say there's a creature that, you know, has pack tactics. Well, maybe you can split that up so that they don't have those things. Maybe there are mindless creatures like zombies or skeletons, and you attack one at range, you draw as much attention, you yell and scream, and then you run, backing out, doing a retreat, defensive retreat, causing those creatures, or maybe one or more of those creatures, to have to split its attention, or split the swarm, or split the horde, so that it opens up spaces for your allies. Also, using grappling and knockdown, you can possibly restrain or prevent a creature, maybe there's a bear or something, from attacking another individual, to give them the opportunity to then help you out. Also, if you're going to play a barbarian with a far higher wisdom score, maybe you are the secondary scout in the group. Maybe there's no player characters that have scouting abilities, like a ranger or a rogue, so you represent that. So now you go out, you hide, you notice things, you find things, details in stonework, you find things in the city. Lastly, you can play a barbarian with a higher charisma score. You don't need to be dirty and unruly and rude and eating with your bare hands or whatever. Maybe you are very charismatic and you have a dark, maybe naturalistic element to you that civilized people find, you know, somewhat enticing, somewhat you know, there's something animalistic that is draws others toward you, and you use that to your advantage. So you don't have to be intimidating and rah rah rah. Maybe you're persuasive. Maybe that you're living in a culture, a more nomadic culture that just happens to deal with civilized people, and you don't have to wear a loincloth. You can wear robes. You can wear fine animal skins and things like that, even silks. You don't have to be the muscle-bound, raging barbarian. All right, so let's rethink rage. I think sometimes we get caught up because the words exist and then we frame ourselves around the words. But if we took a black magic marker and marked out the word rage, we find ourselves with a character that has the ability to boost its strength and endurance and resistance. So let's maybe not use the word rage for a moment. Or if we're going to use it, we use it in a different way. So one manner of rage could be like a serial killer, right? You don't slobber at the mouth and go crazy, but you have this killer instinct. You go quiet and you push all other thoughts out of your mind, and you just want to kill silently, quickly, devastatingly, brutally. But you just go about your business. You are more of a surgeon. You're not a wild beast. You take apart people piece by piece surgically. Remove one hand. Let's remove the other. Let's cut his head off. No, let's remove his intestines. I've got a sharp knife. Let's do that. Maybe someone has to snap their fingers to wake you out of this almost catatonic, not catatonic, but this dreamlike state. So anyway, I've got 5 examples of rethinking the barbarian and coming up with ways to view the barbarian. So let's think of, I'm not referring to the Unearthed Arcana. The Unearthed Arcana has something like this, but I'm just thinking about the basic character. So let's think about the Holy Warrior. So instead of being enraged, you are filled with a holy purpose. You know, you are a defender of religious beliefs, and similar to a paladin, you operate in the same way, right? You have your holy weapon, and you are a defender of what is right and true according to whatever particular god that you worship. And so therefore, it's not rage, it's more of being filled with a holy destiny. And that is why you are resistant to pain. If you've ever seen the movie The Messenger with Mila Jovovich, where she plays, wow, I forgot her name, Joan of Arc. And she went into a fugue state where, you know, she's ordering the knights to attack this castle. And one of the soldiers comes to her and looks down at her. She's got this spear jammed into her leg, and she doesn't have time to feel the pain. She's out here to lead the forces, you know, of French righteousness to, you know, attack the enemy or something. So you could be a holy warrior. Can also be an Olympian. And in this regard, you're not a beast, you're not a warrior, but you have set yourself out for physical perfection, right? You lift weights, you run, you jump, you scale. You're like an explorer. You are a Greek Olympian, you know, god in mortal form, and your job is to put yourself into physical perfection. You stretch, you lift, you throw things. You perfect your accuracy with throwing javelins and the shot put, you know, like sporting events. Or maybe you've set yourself up to physical perfection. So instead of being like a perfect swordsman, you are, you want to develop your muscles so that you look better, so that you feel better, so that you eat things that increase your musculature, your ability to heal, your ability to affect your adrenaline. So instead of rage, you now call your ability adrenaline. There's also the martial artist, and I heard this before, and in the beginning, you're going to go, that doesn't make sense, and then you're going to go, oh, it's perfect. You are a physical martial artist. Think of Muay Thai, MMA. Of course, you got the gladiators. But instead of rage, maybe it's the focus of one's inner chi. It is the embodiment of pushing your body beyond its limits. Although this may sound strange, you could be like a Bruce Lee type, right? With maybe less on the spiritual side, but far more on the martial side. So instead of having rage, you have martial prowess. That's why you don't get hurt, because you block attacks. You do more damage because it's not from strength. It's you know how to strike opponents in a deadly manner. And of course, as a barbarian, you have access to weapons. So you could be a heavy weapons use martial artist. Your strength may not be bulky muscle, but it could be lean, strong, use of muscle and flexibility in a far more intelligent manner than it would be brute strength. So maybe you break bricks because of your chi, not because of your strength. You can bend bars not because of pure power, but you do it by just, you know, you focus yourself, you center your ability, and then you're able to strike someone with deadly force. And lastly, not lastly, but fourth one would be maybe you were affected by a magical blessing, boon, or a curse. So you could shape your character as a lycanthrope, or you can shape your character as a shifter. I believe it's called shifter from Eberron. So your character normally doesn't look strong or enduring, but they have something in their blood that makes them beast-like. And this is where you really delve into the rage, right? So maybe there's the blood of, you know, a werewolf or a werebear or something like that runs through you, or even a feline, a lupine or something. And, you know, when you are enraged, maybe a fur grows off of you, and you can jump far distances and strike with claws or something. And of course, you don't have to actually have claws, but maybe your increased strength is how you describe it. So instead of like breaking bricks, you just say, well, my 17 strength bonus is really from my what I consider to be my paw attack or a claw attack or something like that. Yes, I'm pushing the boundaries, but it's all flavor, right? If you don't change the rules, you can reskin it any way you want. And of course, if you play this kind of character with a high dex, then of course you can jump far. You're very acrobatic, which leans far more towards the feline aspect. If you increase that wisdom, now you have higher perception. Maybe you describe it as not necessarily that you are an investigator, but that you notice things, you smell things, you notice a scent on the air, or you notice tracks or something because you're a natural predator. And lastly would be the alchemical barbarian, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right? You're taking drugs and concoctions that increase your adrenaline and your strength. And you can just describe that as, you're a gentleman. You just average person, but then you open up a bottle, drink it down, and you just become this other beast-like man where you're ripping out of your clothes and you become strong and everything. And of course you may say, well, my character has a normal 17 strength and a 16 constitution. How do I describe that as, being a weakling or something? Well, you're just reskinning it. You're just reshaping it. Maybe you're in a hotel room or something, and bandits come in and they threaten you because they think you're scrawny, and one of the bandits pushes you over into a corner and knocks you over a chair, and then you come standing up like the Hulk, like really you didn't take any damage. It just looked that way, you just whatever. Get out of my way, little scrawny thing. Let's go find that that tome that he had in his backpack, and then you stand up with muscles bulging and ripping out of your clothes, and you grab the guy by his head and rip his spinal cord out or something. So that's an idea. Also, for cutting the barbarian, let's go to 3 other class types that would normally never be a barbarian, but you can play them as a barbarian. So I'm going to start with the monk, the strangest one of the classes that's as far away from barbarian as you can get, right? So instead of playing the barbarian class, you play a monk. Now, normally we think of monks as being very lawful, very centered, very skilled, very in control of themselves. But you can always reskin the monk's abilities and reskin them into what a wild person would do. The ability to survive a great fall is just great endurance. The ability to strike someone rapidly is just your beast-like strength and ability to assault someone in a wild manner, swinging your weapon wildly or something. The other monk abilities where they have bonuses to resist mental intrusion and maybe heal and maybe some spell-like abilities. Instead, you are a creature of pure rage, and you're just reshaping and renaming the monk abilities to represent that. Maybe after you rage, being in the wilderness, getting in touch with your animalistic side, that is what centers you. Also, you could play a monk that is like Shaolin tiger, Shaolin bear, panther, leopard style. And so now you're reshaping your monk to become this animalistic person who has lived in the wild and fights using a style like an animal, because that is how they learn to survive. So they are not necessarily wild, but they are fighting like an animal. And it just so happens that being able to fight like an animal gives them great skill. They just never learned it from anyone. They learned it on their own. How about the Warlock? The Warlock doesn't seem like it matches the Barbarian at all. But what if someone was a small child, was left out in the wild and raised by wolves, right? So maybe as a Warlock, your so-called patron is nature itself. It is a being from nature, maybe a tree spirit or a wild animal patron, or maybe just very nature itself. The small child was taken and protected by a tree, a living tree, and granted these abilities. Now, of course, as I said before, like previously playing a monk or playing a warlock, and next going to talk about playing a wizard as a barbarian, you physically won't be as on the toughest side like a normal barbarian. But if you play smart by being sneaky, by leading enemies away, by striking and running, you can use spell-like abilities which would represent to your character and others the barbaric nature, right? So let's assume I'll give an example, like you have an eldritch blast, or you have a spell like hold person or charm person, but you're playing a barbarian. Maybe hold person, a hold spell, is not an actual mental intrusion, but you're staring them down. That's an element of your intimidation, and they're just frozen in their tracks and you strike them down. Or maybe eldritch blast isn't really an eldritch blast, but it's you picking up debris or a big rock or like a large tree limb or something, and you just hurl this thing with incredible force. Maybe they're knives that you carry, bone knives, and you just toss them like a magic missile, and they always hit. But instead of using your fingers and going floofy, you pull these bone knives out and you unerringly strike your targets, never missing. So you can always shape the spell-like abilities into what appear to be skills. Maybe someone says, well, I didn't know you had knives on you. And you're like, I always come prepared, or something like that, right? You pull these knives out of nowhere and toss them or something. Maybe there are other spell-like abilities, like a grease spell, right? You cast a grease spell, and he's like, well, I'm casting grease on the ground. No, maybe you're leading your enemies into an area that's unstable. And when they step into that area, they trip and fall. Or maybe you knock something over that falls onto the ground, and that is how you represent your grease ability. Or maybe it's just the way you are so dominant in your attacks that everyone around you has a hard time even remaining on their feet because you're swinging so wildly. And it's just a matter of your tactics and your overwhelming ability to take people off of their feet, and that represents your rage. Lastly is the wizard. A wizard does not seem like a barbarian at all, right? No hit points, no ability to avoid damage, not wearing armor, easy to hurt, easy to injure, but there are some spell-like abilities that can bolster that, right? So if you play a wizard with shield spell, magic missile, protections spells, and things of that nature, they could represent your barbaric nature. Like I said, charm person, your presence of personality, you hold your weapon up to someone's throat and you tell them what to do, and they go along with it. Yes, I will go along with it. Spells that blind and entrap could be weapons that you use, or you use parts of nature. You could even have things like, if you want to go really wild, like maybe your mage hand isn't a hand, but it is, you attack someone and then a tree limb grabs something from them or trips them up, and then you strike them when they are distracted, right? So of course, if you play a wizard as a barbarian, someone's going to say, well, you have to have a wizard's book. Not necessarily. Maybe instead of a wizard's book, you have rune stones. You have a pouch with stones, and you use these stones. Each each morning and look to the god of, Odin, and to bless you so that you may continue. You could also play a very old barbarian, right? So you're in your 60s, you're like a hermit, and you don't have much muscle mass, but you're more of a Viking, right? You are like the Scandinavian person with a long white beard and a staff, but you still remember the old days of going to war, and using the wizard-like abilities is actually you channeling that Viking beast inside of you. So anyway, I could go on and on with this, but anyway, we're going to cut class with the Barbarian. These just my couple of 2 cents on the Barbarian and rethinking it. I'm just going to end with how I started it. Don't play a Barbarian where someone else in your party is literally a secondary portion of your character, always healing you, always bolstering you. Another player character is not a portion of your character. Play your character intelligently, smartly, and in a immersive manner, because if you're just going to run headlong into combat as a barbarian, you're not going to survive very long. It's like it's the same people play paladins that way. I'm just going to run into combat because that's what my character would do. You don't have to play a character like that. And if a barbarian is to survive, especially on their own, then they would do it intelligently. They see a black bear, they're not just going to run up and attack it. Maybe they lead it away. Maybe they leave a trail of meat or something. Maybe they strike it from a distance or strike it from behind. Maybe they do run up and attack it, trying to knock it into a river. All of these things. They use a big spear, polearm, and keep it at bay so they can strike it without, having the claws strike back at it. Use and learn other tactics. You don't need to necessarily be the tank in the classic sense of I'm going to stand in front and absorb damage. You can do that, but you can do that from other angles. So you can be on one side of a creature, have that creature turn its back to your fellows, and then they can strike it from behind as it attacks you, facing you. DBJ, I'm out. Thanks for cutting class with me. Have a good one.